Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, to Magic Time. I'm your host Thomas, coming to you from my home here in the Napa Valley. And I wanted to rap real quick about which wines I believe are the best to age, which wines age gracefully and will mature and become better over time. Wines that have a significant amount of what we refer to as tannin, or are certain polyphenols that make the wine rather dry and form the backbone of substance and power of a red wine, tend to age really well. And wines that have relatively high acidity as well. It's a combination for success when talking about aging red wines. And there's a few throughout the world, which I'll go over, that have those in spades and are probably the best wines to consider putting down in your wine cellar, and there are certain wines that will improve with time. Now, probably the longest lived wines of all are those that are very, very sweet, have a very high sugar content, have good acid, and in some cases, like in the case of port or Madeira, are fortified with brandy, so they have a high alcohol level. That also acts as a preservative against oxidation. At any rate, I would say that in terms of the red wines that age with grace, you're going to want to look for Bordeaux, high quality Bordeaux, which is generally speaking Cabernet based. And if you're on the right bank of the Gironde estuary in Bordeaux, in Saint-Emilion or Pomerol, that would be Merlot based. But these are wines that have significant structure to them. Cabernet, Merlot, Cab Franc blends, and in some cases Petit Verdot and Malbec. These are wines that have a strong phenolic base to them. The skins of these grapes have a lot of natural polyphenols, or what we call tannin. And they pick their grapes a little bit earlier than what happens here in Napa Valley. They don't seek that ultra rich ripeness like we do, and plus their weather is not quite as warm and consistent like it is here in Napa Valley. So Bordeaux, for the most part, and left bank Bordeaux in particular, the top growths, whether first, second, third, all the way through fifth growth Bordeaux, those tend to age very gracefully in your cellar and will even appreciate in overall value if you're looking to sell these wines on a secondary market. I will put up a video about which wines are good investments. I don't overall believe that wine is an asset that appreciates and will allow you to turn a profit on it in the future, but we can talk about that more in detail. Other wines that age rather gracefully are certain Italian wines. Wines that have a high acid and tannin base would be like Nebbiolo based wines like Barolo or Barbaresco from Piedmont in Italy. Brunello di Montalcino, which is 100% Sangiovese Grosso and is a Tuscan wine, tends to age really gracefully, and it has richness and substance and acid that allows it to improve with age and time in the cellar. A few other Italian wines as well that have grip and will last a long time as well. I won't get into the nitty gritty of Italian wines that age really well, but Barolo, Barbaresco, and certain Sangiovese based wines such as Brunello di Montalcino will age pretty gracefully in the cellar. In terms of Napa Cab, I always say like the strike point in terms of aging a high quality Napa Cab is about 8 to 10 years in. So yes, they do age really, really well. But that's kind of producer based as well. Here in Napa Valley, we have a slew of modern wineries that produce wines of richness and power and ripeness and have a lot of alcohol. And these wines are delicious when they're really young. But the ones that tend to age really well here in Napa Valley are wineries with a distinctive history of kind of doing things the old way, kind of like the Bordeaux style. Some of those are like Heights and Heights Martha's Vineyard. That wine in particular ages really well. Chateau Montelena, their Reserve Cabernet, ages really gracefully. I would say Diamond Creek. Those are wines from up on Diamond Mountain that have extremely rich, powerful tannins, but are also relatively high in acidity and end up aging a very long time. Mayacamas, a winery up on Mount Veeder, tends to do an older school style of production, and their wines age really well. And there's a slew of other ones. Dominus is a wine that ages, one of the longer aging wines here in Napa Valley, I would say 10, 15, 20 years in, no problem. And I'm going to leave out, of course, a whole other bunch of wineries here in Napa Valley that do things kind of in the old school approach. Cathy Corazon also, Corazon wines, they tend to age really, really well. But at any rate, Napa Valley, I would say 8 to 10 years is usually the peak point and the strike point to where you want to drink those beautiful high-end Cabernets here in Napa. Now, when you talk about Pinot Noir, I would say that Sonoma County Pinot Noir in most cases isn't a super long-term ager. Anywhere from 5 to 10 years in is kind of a sweet spot for Sonoma County Pinot Noir, and especially in the Russian River. Now, in certain cases, of course, I could be proved wrong with those wines. But red Burgundy, especially high-class, high-priced red Burgundy, Grand Cru and Premier Cru bottlings will last, 15 to 20 years, and in some cases longer than that, and age really gracefully. That is not so much for the phenolics in the wine, or the tannin, but more about the acidity, and that those wines have dripping and bracing acidity that allow them to age really well. In terms of white wine, most white wine in the world needs to be drunk within the first few years after being bottled. But white Burgundy in particular, if you get the right producer and the right quality, white Burgundy 10, 15 years in can be an absolute marvel. And the wines develop complexity and layers, and they have enough acidity and body and richness to allow them to age gracefully. Above and beyond that, Sauterne, the dessert wine from the south part of Bordeaux, is a very long ager, and if you get the right ones of a certain level, they can last 50 plus years in the wine cellar, no problem. Of course, I already mentioned Port and Madeira, which are dessert wines that are fortified. Those wines can last 100 years plus if you get the right style, and are very long-lived. Even after you open the bottle, they'll stay for several days longer than a normal bottle of wine. So in the total spectrum of wines that you want to age, I didn't actually mention the white wines of Germany, which have really bracing acidity and very high sugar levels in some cases, certain Rieslings and Grand Crus, also from Alsace, some of those Grand Crus. Those white wines age with grace, and you can have them 15, 20 plus years in as well. So in terms of what you want to save for your wine cellar that will improve over time, I would say Bordeaux, kind of on the higher price Bordeaux, Barolo, Barbaresco, and Brunello, the 3 Bs there in Italy. Definitely fortified wines, Port Madeira, vintage port if you can get your hands on it. It's rather expensive these days. Those wines age with a lot of grace, and you can hold them almost indefinitely. Napa Cabs from certain producers, do your research on that and find out which wineries are producing wines with not only the richness and power of Cabernet from Napa, but also the intensity of tannin and acid, and those producers that maybe picked their grapes just a tiny bit earlier here in Napa Valley. And then as of white wines, white Burgundy from Burgundy, France, that is of a high quality, Premier Cru and Grand Cru level, and certain Rieslings and wines of Germany and of Alsace, France as well. So that's kind of my breakdown of which wines will age with grace and longevity in your wine cellar. If you guys love the channel and love these videos, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out a lot, and thank you so much for joining me once again. Cheers.